All right, so inside of the portfolios, you're going to have the classroom profile. You'll have the student group by subgroup report for ELA, for math. You also are going to have it at the school level and at the class level. Y'all saw all of those documents last time you were here, and we hope that you've gotten access to lots of things over the past week. All right, so we are at a place in our assessment window where a lot of you are done with PM2 testing, and you might be wondering, now what? Now what do we do? We've got to use this, and we've got to use this data fast, right? Like we've got to get data in the hands of teachers so that they can make decisions about how to help the kids in the best way possible. You want it to have significant impact. You want it to matter. So what are you going to do? In this session, in this round of Rural Connect, your teachers are going to experience a mid-year reflection as if they were Leslie Knope. And we want you guys to have a firsthand experience of what that feels like, what they are going to go through as Leslie, and then later you're going to get to see it when they interact with their own data back at your school. So we're going to do this in a kind of a carousel protocol. It's going to look a little bit different though, not exactly the same as we've done before. But I'm going to give you a minute to set up, and what you are going to do is clear some space because we're doing it at the tables. So there's chart paper at the end of the table. If you will, grab a marker and divide it into 4 quadrants, and I'll give you instructions in a moment. Kind of like a placemat, but no box in the middle. Okay, you should have 4 quadrants, and your chart paper should be in the center of the table. You should have cleared some space. All right. As you were getting that prepared, Lindsay handed you some documents. Let's talk about what she handed you. You have 2 copies of Leslie Knope's math data. If you will, hand one of those papers to people on one side of the table and hand the other to the people on the other side of the table so that you both can see Leslie Knope's math data. It has a front and a back, classroom profile, and then the student group or the student growth by subgroup on the back. So it has a front and back. You also are going to have ELA data, front and back, the class profile, and the student growth by subgroup, okay? Both sides of the table should be able to see that for the reflection you're about to do. You also have in your packet a mid-year teacher reflection tool, and that's actually going to be the steps of our carousel. So it's a stapled pack. Give one to both sides of the table so that everyone can see that. All of the questions are going to be on the screen, but you're also going to have them right in front of you. If you want to write on that, if you want to, take notes on that, that's totally fine. It will be yours at the end of the protocol. All right, we're going to, actually let me set it up for you also by saying that you're looking at Leslie Knope's data, but you're not Leslie Knope, you're you. You have experiences as educators, whether it's the teaching experience or the leadership experience, but that's going to inform your decisions that you make and how you interpret that data. That is fine. Be you, okay? Pretend like it is your data. You don't have to be Leslie Knope, second-year teacher. You be you, okay? There will be some imagining that you have to do if it asks specifically about what's happening, what she's doing. Like, you're going to have to imagine yourself in that position, but do answer it based on your own experiences. All right, now that I've told you that, I am going to have you just kind of dip your toes. Box 1, find your box 1, put a 1 at the top of it, in one of the quadrants, label the first quadrant. Okay, in that first quadrant, we're going to answer question number 1. And question number 1 is this. You're going to decide by looking at those data sheets that you have, what percentage of Miss Nope's students have met growth indicator 1 and growth indicator 2 on PM2. You have ELA and math data on your chart. Make it look something like this, where you record your responses for both. You only need to do question 1 for now.
Indicator 1 status would be 75%.
It's got it separated.
For ELA. And then math would, or indicator 2 would be 46.
Let us know if you need help finding it. It's pretty explicit.
The crux of it in simple terms is some students need to learn more than others. The crux is some students need to learn more than others. Some students, I'm not okay with this student staying at that percentile ranking forever. He may learn a year's material in a year's time relative to his peers, but unless he gets growth indicator 2, he's not moving forward.
He's not catching up.
Exactly. So that's kind of
So this is just to show the students that we should be on alert for, that learning enough in a year still may not be enough to make a game.
Like for them.
Yeah, I don't want to simplify it to that degree without double checking that, because I don't want to say that's a hard and fast rule.
Well,
There's a situation where it's not.
I do remember us kind of talking about in one of the trainings that like these kids, some teachers may look at that. It's like, oh, they're in the green, we're good.
Right.
But it's like, yes, they're in the green, but they're not on track to make a game.
Precisely.
And they're not on grade level.
They're not on grade level.
And that's where it boils down to, like, some students need to move faster than
Right.
others, if we want to ever get them where they need to be. So, and that's a crazy simplified version of it, but it's one way to think of it.
Okay, I think most of you have found it. Let's check. How did you do? What percentage of Miss Nope's students have met growth indicator 1 and growth indicator 2 in ELA? What'd you find? Somebody just shout it out. Growth indicator 1, 70 what? 75%. Growth indicator 2, what was it? 46%. Did you get it? Okay. What about for math? What was it? What was the percentage of students who met growth indicator 1? 38%. Growth indicator 2? 17%. All right. You see what you have in your hand? Everybody feeling good? All right. We're going to do question 2 and 3 on the bird's eye view. So still part 1, same page. What might be different instructionally between ELA and math? And based on those growth indicators, what should Ms. Nope do? Take a look at the data again and complete that together. Put your responses in quadrant 1 after y'all have had time to discuss it.
That's what I was just going to say. I think they want y'all to put it on the poster too.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just looking at other people's and I'm like, oh, everyone's writing on the poster.
Yeah.
So we need to put our percentages here. I think she's teaching to the low friends.
Lower kids.
Like here, she's probably looking at this. She probably is teaching more grade level material. She's probably backing up, thinking that all. My assumption is she's treating these friends like they're tier kids.
Yes. Because look.
See what they say, but based on that.
Unless that's on par with the state, that's really concerning.
She's teaching just to the low.
Is she teaching right? Is she teaching tier 2 or tier 3? Is she trying to go back and fill in gaps that she's not teaching the grade level standards in math? Has she decided that they're just not ready? Or does she have a really good reading coach who's gone to Rural Connect and she does not have a good math coach, or her reading coach doesn't understand math?
So she's able, these kids are moving in ELA, all the kids, throughout are moving here, the higher achieving kids are not.
The starting point.
And higher achieving
How do
starting
you
even
do
as
that?
low as high 2, right? We start to see at high 2. So what do you think's happening instructionally here?
She's slowed. She's going too slow.
Maybe too slow, so it could be a pace issue. What else
She may
could
not
it
be
be?
challenging. You know what I'm saying? Teaching to the level.
Well, and look at the growth here in your level 1s. What might she be doing?
Catering to them. She's teaching to the lower students.
The teacher is going a little slower because you have to have a solid foundation in multiplication and division before you can start doing decimals and before you can do fractions. And
So there's a couple
we did
ways to kind of help
a
start
quadrant chart where you
the
have
conversation. So
how much you, like we did last year, where you have
what
how
should
much
she do in
instruction
math
have
versus
you given
ELA?
and
So
what
keep doing what she's
percentage
doing.
are they
Adjust
at
tier 1
looking at
instruction
a
to
tier
reach
1.
more students, or
She had a lot of things that she hasn't taught yet. And so
Pace is a big issue.
It is real
and
data
PM2
for
is a great place
teacher.
to figure out that
Yes.
your pace isn't
And
working out. PM3 is the wrong place to figure
that's
that out.
what we did at our last PL was look at our data that way, so we knew which benchmarks to focus on more heavily than the others.
So when we're looking at scale scores and proficiency levels, but when we're just looking at percentiles, it's even playing field.
Yeah.
Which
So
is why this is really helpful.
So would you then go in, so saying like everybody's on the same playing field with those standards and percentile, if my kids are not growing fast enough, would I then go in and look at the standards that I've taught and see how those stack up?
Maybe. So like look at math. Which students, it's not all red lines, which students are growing?
So it's like our 3s are dropping. Our 1s and 2s are growing.
1s and 2s are growing.
But our upper is dropping.
Okay.
So maybe read.
Which would make me think tier 1 instruction.
Right.
What might not be happening in tier 1 instruction?
Are you asking the question, or are you saying
Yeah,
that's the
yeah.
question
I'm
you would
asking.
think?
Yeah, like what might not be happening in
the
tier
rigor.
1. Yeah, the rigor's not there.
She might be teaching to her lower kids and forgetting about her higher.
Yeah.
Whereas
like
you need to do the opposite.
We're not
You
hitting
need
the full
to
depth.
teach high and then scaffold up for those 1s
Okay.
and 2s.
All right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's very eye-opening.
We're about to rotate. You are going to change tables. Okay, so I want you to pretend that the center of the room is the middle of a clock, and we're going to go we're going to go clockwise around the room, switching to a different table. You're going to skip that empty table, so you guys are going to go here. Okay. Leave the papers. Leave the chart. You can take. You don't need markers or anything. It's all there. Switch tables. All right. As you guys get settled, you are going to think about how the group that left this chart in front of you, think about how they interpreted the data. Think about the things that they wrote on their chart. I want you to compare it to your response. Leave some feedback. Add some notes as you see it's appropriate. I'll give you a couple of minutes, and then we're going to do some whole group share out on that.
True, she could be like integrating science and social studies into ELA and like really expanding the amount of time that they do that versus
So basically, like benchmark standards for ELA.
And so maybe
like more
review
time.
to see what the block looks like. And then
she might have 180 minutes of ELA integrated, so kids get lots of time
Could be.
practicing that versus math.
Maybe a schedule
she
issue.
may not really like that.
Right.
Right.
So y'all can add to it, like just write in a different color, like what you think might also be going on. You can also edit it, say like, I don't think this is right, or put a check mark, however you want to.
So I'd like to know the definition of bump up. I'd like to know here what's the definition of bump up. What do they mean by
Meeting the rigor of the benchmark is
Okay.
probably what they mean.
Write a little question there if you want.
What do you mean by that?
We want to
I mean,
add
like, and
looking
how
at
to
the
do
schedule
that.
here, maybe.
That would be like a.
I'm gonna have to write this way because
Yeah,
I
that's
can't.
Yeah.
You can write upside down.
Go lefty.
Examine schedule, maybe.
Let's do the ELA.
Let me pull you guys back together. Let me hear from you. What might be happening that is different between ELA and math? What instructionally might be different? What's going on there? What were some of the responses that you either put yourself or you saw at a group that you think is worthy of note? What might be happening? What's different about it? Remember, you're reflecting as a teacher. What's different?
They spend a lot more time on ELA, and that's usually the prime time of day. That 90-minute reading block starts, as soon as kids get there.
Yes.
And math tends to, okay, we'll do that in the afternoon.
That's a great consideration. Thank you for that, Tanya. I agree. There's more time, right? And it might be at a better time of the day. If we're Miss Note, we know that, right? Yeah. What else could be happening, Gina?
I think if I were Miss Nope and I was looking at this data to start with, I might be treating my students who are scoring tier 3 as such, maybe not looking at the percentiles and their capabilities down the road and saying, oh, I need to do a lot of intervention. So it looks like those are the kids making the most growth. Those friends that were in the red are
Do you think that's
making
different
moves.
for ELA than math?
I do. It seemed like there was ELA growth.
So why do you think that? Why do you think it's different?
We see the same thing happening at our school right now, and we've talked about it. Like ELA, they've hit the standards already, so now we're going back in. They're spiraling. Those constantly are spiraling. You don't just teach them in one succession. Where math, there was quite a bit of content that they haven't hit those standards yet, and so that's where we saw like a big difference between ELA and math. Like math just hasn't covered all of their standards yet. At PM2.
That reminds me of conversations that I've had with my team, though. Jake, can you speak to that?
Yeah, so just one thing to remember, and you're right, it is a much bigger deal in the math class than it is in the ELA class when we think about pacing. But remember, we're not looking at scale scores or levels, we're looking at percentiles. And so when I'm looking at the percentile as it has changed from last year's PM3 to PM1 to PM2, I'm looking at a comparison of what my students have done to what all the other students have done, and I'm not the only teacher in the state of Florida that's only taught half of my content or a third of my content or whatever that fractional piece of my benchmarks that I've covered. Granted, depending on what curriculum I've used, maybe I taught this subset and another teacher taught another subset, but no one in Florida is done by December, and so it's still apples to apples. And if there are teachers who are outpacing me or their students are outpacing my students, maybe they're doing something that I'm not doing that I could have been doing. Luckily at PM2, I still have time to do.
This is something that you're going to hear with teachers. It will come up a lot. Shannon or Sam, do you have anything you wanted to add to that? I know y'all have heard it a lot, haven't you?
It's very common. And so if you all have that beautiful answer at the ready, you can help them understand how that's maybe not it, so what else could it be, right?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. All right. Any other thing that stands out to you that might be different? Your comments have been valuable, and to bring to light something that is so commonly addressed when teachers look at the data. I think that's valuable for us to be able to talk about pacing and the apples to apples comparison as well. All right, so what should Ms. Nope do based on those growth indicators for ELA? What'd you say? For ELA, anybody? Did you say that she should adjust her Tier 1 instruction to reach more students? Would you guys agree with that? And Why did you make that? How did you know that that was an appropriate response? What did you look at?
Half of her students.
The number of her students?
46.
Say more.
Half of her students were on growth indicators, so it looks like they're learning quickly enough so that by PM3 we would expect that they've learned a year's worth of material and they would push that percentile score.
About half the kids are learning quickly enough, and so we got to we've just got to do some refining work. It's close. We got to do a little more, and it's that halfway point. So we know that there's more to do, but it's not as dire as maybe it is in math. How many of you considered that she should rethink her Tier 1 instruction? The number of students growing quickly enough is way too low, right? So she's going to need to rethink that, and I know that in your roles, you are instrumental in helping her rethink that, and there's all kind of things that you can do, which we will continue to think about throughout this process. All right, so I'm going to have you think now. We're going to go to box 2, okay? So in box 2, we're going to do some celebrating. There's some good stuff in every report. There's something that we can find that is a positive trend. So I want you to consider what student group has the fastest average growth. Did any students skew that average? How many of them have met growth indicator 2 in that subgroup? And what might be different instructionally for these students that's different than the other subgroups? So answer these questions in box 2 using the data that's in front of you. Make sure you're checking out that subgroup report first.
Level 1s in math, as far as growth indicators, are outpacing everyone else. But she was asking, did anybody skew it? Would you agree that student B skewed it? Because there's so much growth for student B.
So that's a tricky one.
Or no?
So remember that the subgroup growth visual is comparing the prior year result to the current.
Oh, and he's not on there for a prior year. You're right.
Doesn't have a prior year result.
You're right.
So it's kind of a red herring.
You're right.
That's actually not skewing the average.
Good
We
point.
don't know that student. Yeah, maybe that student was level 3 in the prior year.
Yeah, he doesn't even have.
But so who else might be skewing the average? Then you can still find some maybe.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. You're right. Sure didn't.
Student A is probably still skewing it.
Right here.
Yeah. Yeah. The others are, but
Right
they're
here.
mostly green, right? So they're in a similar trend. But student A is definitely pulling that bar, which tempers the celebration a little, right? Yeah.
So this kind of touches on what we've already talked about. What do you think is happening differently for this group that's causing them to grow more quickly than the other groups?
They're just getting more attention. Whether it's
Probably. It could be attention. What else could it be?
Tier 1 instruction is focused more on their needs.
Yeah, I'm thinking.
and that's what I mean. Yeah, like
Achievement level descriptors, and the rigor of questions that are being asked. Are they probably being asked to do error analysis?
Probably not.
Probably not, right? And not being exposed to those things is going to impact all of those guys who are going to see those types of questions on the fastest.
Why are all my boys?
Well, it
Must
might
have
not be
something
all,
against
it's
the boys.
average. There might be one or two
Yeah,
boys
true.
who are growing, one or two girls who aren't. It is an average, but yeah. Worth thinking about.
Am I correct in remembering that this doesn't mean that they necessarily scored a level 1 on that PM?
Correct.
Yeah, it's the prediction.
It's just
Correct.
a prediction
Well,
based on the percentile.
Yes. So there is a chance that none of these bubbles actually represent the level at that time.
Right.
So I'll start with previous year. So like previous year, this was definitely going to be a 1. And I can look over here and see previous year was 1. But these previous year percentiles, this is 5th grade. That's a 4th grade percentile that we're mapping onto the 5th grade rainbow chart.
Gotcha.
So there's even a chance that someone like their open circle falls on 3. They were actually a 4 last year because the percentile stuff moves.
Assuming if they didn't grow, they would actually drop a level.
And that's exactly what it means,
Right.
yeah. And then when we're looking at PM1 and PM2, what we're looking at is if their percentile stayed the same, like they were 12th percentile, and
they didn't
they're
grow.
12th again and they're 12th again, this is what they will be.
Right.
So someone like this student here, PM2 is a really high level 4, almost a level 5. This student was almost certainly not a 4 at PM2.
He might have been a high 2, low 3.
May have been a 3,
Right.
may have been a low 4, but certainly wasn't a high 4
Because
looking
of
at that scale score.
percentile.
But if that percentile stays the same, going from PM2 to PM3, this is where that student will
So
be.
how does that relate to when they're figuring out this growth indicator 1?
So
like
we're
there's-
just comparing percentile.
Mm-hmm.
So if the percentile from the assessment we're connecting to the assessment we're looking at, if that percentile stays the same or goes up, we get that growth indicator 1. That means we're maintaining or we're
So if they
growing.
grow at all, they get this growth
Yeah, if
indicator
they
1.
maintain or grow
Okay.
at all, they get growth indicator 1. But
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter
because
how
to
much they
maintain
grow.
percentile, you would grow. You
You would
your
grow.
scale
Grow
grow
is gonna
a
grow.
year's
Yeah,
worth of
yeah.
material.
Exactly.
Because to be a 12th percentile for 3rd grade, to stay a 12th percentile
You
in
would
4th grade, you would
drop.
have to grow a year's worth. That's where they're
Yeah.
getting the year's worth of growth
Okay.
from.
But the reason we have 2, growth indicator 2, is not every student needs to grow the same.
Right.
If I'm 98th percentile
Well, you're
and
one.
I stay 98th percentile for the rest of my life, that's fantastic.
Right.
If I'm 5th percentile and I stay 5th percentile into 3rd grade and into 4th grade and into 5th grade and into 6th grade, like that's not going to cut it, right? Like
Right.
I've
You've
got
gotta
to
grow
be
those
growing
buckets.
in terms of getting the
faster.
quickly enough.
Exactly, that's the quickly enough. Which is why this looks at not just maintaining or growing, but are you growing enough to move into that next tier level? If I'm a low level 1,
And to
I
catch
need
up
to
to
get
be
to
on grade
mid-level
level.
1. I need to get
Yeah.
to high level 1 if I'm a mid-level 1, so that I am eventually going to get to grade level.
I'm getting the year's material now because we were confused.
Yeah.
We're like, how are you saying
then-
that they're gaining a year's worth of material without them actually moving a bucket? But it's because of that.
But
like,
it's a year for them.
But
It's
it's
the
because
percentile.
it's because we're putting that percentile on a new grade level.
Right.
Whereas if
Exactly.
they weren't growing a year's worth, then they would drop from 5 to like
Yeah, if
4
my
or
scale
3.
score stayed the same, my percentile's going to drop
Yeah.
Right.
year over year over year.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And if the percentile stays the same, then they've moved proportionally a year to their peers.
Exactly.
I got it.
Exactly.
I'm trying not to rush you, but I'm also trying to get all the way through the protocol, right? So let's talk together for a moment. For celebrations, which group did you see was growing the fastest? Did you notice that our level 1 students had a relatively thick bar pushing to the right? I noticed some of you saw other bars pushing right. This one is one that I think we noticed a lot of growth indicators, success, and so some of you may have gone straight to the classroom profile to check that out, right? And did you notice that there were a few students who had long green lines? You may have noticed in level 1, we had student A had a relatively long line, student G had a relatively long line. Why did I not choose student B? Because the line is long. They didn't have PM3 data from the prior year. So that is why student B was not, that person is not skewing the data. A and G could be a little bit, but it's still worthy of celebration, wouldn't you say? We have a lot of students who are meeting those growth indicators. All right, so also you answered what is different instructionally. What did you think was different? What's going on? Level 1 kids, if you're Miss Nope or you're you, what do you say?
We had a conversation together at one of the other tables and then repeated it again that we felt like there was that low floor for the lowest of the low students, but there was not that high ceiling. So there was a lot of instruction that was happening at a lower rigor level, and they weren't reaching up to the top of the ALPs.
Right. instruction geared straight toward that need.
What did you say? Low floor, low ceiling. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Anything else come up?
Yeah, Renee, I want to add something that we talked about over here that I think is a really important consideration when we are especially looking at kind of the cross-section of the individual student reports and then that subgroup report when we are reflecting on Tier 1 instruction. One of the conversations was, well, what if there's an interventionist? Maybe like all the instruction, we might think of it this way, but there's some kind of intervention happening with those Tier 2 or Tier 3 students, and that's why they're getting a little more growth. But I kind of threw that back at them, and I want to thing for everyone. And my question was, well, what if that's not the case? And what if this really is a reflection of what's going on in Tier 1 instruction? And I think keeping that in mind as leaders is really important, and that we communicate that with our teachers is also really important. We've got a lot of defense mechanisms built up for this, right? And especially over the last couple of years, as we've talked about how uncomfortable we've felt thinking about PM1 and PM2 data because we felt like something wasn't quite right. And so we've built up a lot of defense mechanisms for those. And I mean, y'all are the most eager to learn that we have, and it's tough. And so when we go back to our teachers, kind of just remembering to throw those things out, like what if this really is a reflection of Tier 1 instruction? Then what would we do? Then what would that mean? And keeping that in mind, because we say a lot like once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like what if it really is? Then what would we do differently?
I love that consideration. Thank you, Jake. Anything else?
I think too, without being able to see what she's doing, it's hard to know what she's doing because she could be teaching like her hair's on fire and teaching at the standards, but maybe she's loving her kids too much. Maybe she's modeling too much. Maybe she's got them working in groups and 3 or 4 kids are working together and like one kid's doing all the work. Or I mean, there's a lot of things that could be that could be happening that.
Yeah, she could be loving them into the lowest quartile,
Right.
wouldn't she? Because we want to assume positive intent about her, and we know she's probably working really hard, right? But we want her to work on the right things. So there's a reason to celebrate. We saw some things that she's doing right with her level 1 kids. Why is this so important? Why might it be so important to celebrate?
We can't afford to lose more teachers.
We can't afford to lose them. We've got to encourage them. We've got to have something positive to bring before them, right? Like when they look at this data, we want them to gain confidence and courage. There's another reason, though, that's so important. Think about the things that she is doing well. The main thing, she is really reaching some of her level 1 students. And so what might we want her to remember?
All of her hard work and tears is making a difference in the children, and she did it with a certain population, so she can emulate that. Looking back at data and, talking with her PLC for collective efficacy,
Yeah.
she can do it.
We want her to think about why that's working. What about that is so right that she is gaining some ground there? Her kids are gaining some ground there. Why is that? And we really want this reflection to reveal those practices that are working and going right so that she can do some replicating of that thing with other groups, for sure. Yeah. All right. We're now going to turn to concerns. In box number 3, I want you to answer these questions. Which student group has the slowest average growth? Are there any students skewing the data? How many meet the growth indicator number 2? And what might be different instructionally for that group of students? All right? Box 3, think about concerns.
They just have to have a prior and a current year score.
Okay.
So they're there because that's where they were the last time we tested.
They tested. Okay.
So we find any students pulling down the data.
So that would be an outlier because we don't have their current data yet. Their current.
And so for 3, 4s, and 5.
But they've gone from there to
Right.
there.
They're still, as far as our percentile, it's gone down. This one too, percentile is still way down.
So do you find
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, do they have a prior year?
Student
N.
Yep.
It's a pretty negative decrease.
Yes.
Student N went way back. Now, granted, that's only PM1 though. I don't see a PM2 on there, so that might not count. You know what I mean? Like how before, like so maybe I don't know.
Because they did, yeah, they don't have PM2.
So let's see. Level 3 prior year. That's not really skewed. You got student O.
Prior year. I mean, they went from a 3 to a low level 2.
Yeah.
So
Y'all see student O?
Yep.
No, is it O or
So if you
P?
say level 3s, let's look at this column here. Okay, circle, open circle, last year.
R.
The
Okay.
white
So-
students.
The lowest,
They lost.
the most ground.
Yeah,
But this
biggest
group,
population.
But there's only 4 in this one, but there's 20 in this one. So basically this
3 or more students, yeah.
So these kids in this group,
So that's gonna be 3 immediately, level 3?
Level 3s.
and then ED and the economic status.
Okay, so we're
Because
gonna
there's
do-
20 in that group that lost ground. That's,
Because
that's
the
almost the whole
subgroup.
class.
Yes.
Because it's just asking for the subgroup though, so we're gonna do the ED economic status.
When we say subgroup, we just mean any of the groups. So
All
this
of it.
counts.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
it's
right,
not like
so-
us as subgroups. It's
Okay.
just
I
would
groups
say
of
this.
students. Yeah.
So number 1 and 3 is level 3 students.
I hate to cut it off, but we need to rotate again. So if you didn't leave a response, just jot a note real fast as you get up to go.
Male and Hispanic. What's interesting is the first time, or last year's, she was higher, which she can still be. Lesbian frequency. And she dropped back and she came back up. So she got a little more time.
Which one are you on?
We were looking at Y, just to say that there is the 3 males there in the kids who didn't make, or they're not making growth in the proficient category of level 3.
All right, so question 1.
So she's worried about 4 going that way.
It's missing.
I think
Yes.
Okay.
So do you think it's the fact that they're male or the fact that they're higher performing or some combination of the two?
Could be.
She said yes.
From
Yes.
working at a almost all boys school, they are hard to sometimes motivate, and they're a little bit rowdy. You have to teach boys differently. I mean, I will say that, especially when you have large groups of them in class together.
Yeah, but he's
And if they're higher performing and we have established instruction is probably pointed way too low, they're going to act out more and lose more ground.
Exactly.
They don't have access to the content. You can only go as far as what you're given.
I heard as I was walking around, many of you said that you were concerned about the levels, the level 3, the level 4, the level 5. I heard all kinds of combinations about that. I also heard males. Were some of you concerned about the males? I want to show you something about those males that is kind of interesting. When you go to the class profile and you find all of the males, and then you layer onto that the males that are 3s, 4s, and 5s, what do you notice? Might there be a relationship to the males that are in the 3, 4, 5 group. What do you see here? Those males, there's some growth indicator 1. Checked. Growth indicator 2 is not. But they are on pace to learn a year's material in a year's time, and they're male. So it's not all males, but the males that are in this 3, 4, 5 level, you are seeing red. There's definitely a relationship there, right? So what did y'all think about that? Like, those of you who noticed this, did you think about the main thing that you're concerned about? Might be what? Gina, I see you nodding your head. What's the main thing you're concerned about? Go back. Looking down. Are you concerned about the 3s, 4s, and 5s? Are you also concerned about the males? But we're especially concerned if the males belong to that group.
We're losing our proficient friends. So our friends, even looking at the level 3, we know kids who are level 3 are at risk of or need additional support in the following year, right? According to the FAST report, it's concerning that they're dropping multiple buckets. These friends. Mm-hmm. So
it's at the level of the rigor of the standards that are being taught.
Right, males are not.
Engagement of
Right.
students.
And as we move into that last box, I think we need to probably have this conversation whole group. I'm going to give you a minute to talk about it at your table, though. I want you to consider this. Let me get back to it. For part 4 and 5, we want Ms. Nope, or whoever might be in that teacher role, we want them to think about some things. What does Ms. Nope know now about her Tier 1 instruction and the impact of it? And we also want to know what ideas she might have that she's going to bring to the conversation. Why she thinks that she needs to do that thing, and the support that she needs. So I want you to talk about it at your table for about a minute, and then we'll talk whole group.
Yeah, because they've already got it. I don't have to worry about them. I'm going to focus on these. Mm-hmm. And they're just left
And they
to
really don't have it.
Left to their own.
Right.
And teach themselves.
Could be.
But one of the good things is she doesn't have the excuse of they can't do it, or they're not capable, or I've got to keep focusing on those big skills because they can't do it. So she's got level 3s, 4s, and 5s who are capable of that grade level work or those grade level standards. She's just got to figure out how to manage the time she's got for math, and how to really break that apart. And I think that's hard sometimes because math really does tend to stand alone, where you can pull science and social studies into ELA reading. It's hard to do that with math. And so they've got to figure out the scheduling of the day and give math the time it needs. We have given ELA so much support.
Yeah.
And math is really kind of
not getting to the regular.
I don't think we are asking fast knowledge.
Or exposing the students to the fast style questions where the students are responding. She might be modeling and not releasing it.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be
it's
a
like a
combination.
teacher reading the passage for them and then asking them the
Exactly.
question. Don't read the passage. Right.
Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing in math. We have the same problem. Is it content, right? And I wouldn't know that unless I compared it with another teacher's data. Is it curriculum? If it's not a curriculum thing, right? Because you have to kind of go through. Okay, if it's not curriculum, then what is it?
What is it?
Right? Is it you're not releasing learning to
And
the
then
students?
that's going to come from observation data where you walk through and you see how many opportunities they have to
And then
engage.
in reality, if our teams are planning together, they should be relatively using
The same
materials.
strategies
So
and
exactly.
materials.
So if all teachers come back and all the data looks similar, then we know it's a tier 1 problem.
Right.
However, if it's not a tier 1 problem, then it's the implementation and the instruction.
the strategies.
So then what do you do,
Right.
right? And so that's where the change has to happen.
That's right.
Right? In the coaching.
Or PBIS. I did. I mean, 5th grade. I did say it could be behavior.
Oh, well, yeah.
Or I mean, maybe we get a little frustrated and angry.
So some reflection questions we want to ask are what?
Let's talk together. Jake heard some conversations and wanted to talk about this before we talk about that part 4 and 5. So I'm going to turn it over to him for a moment.
Yeah. So part of looking at that aggregate view and trying to answer that question of what's going on in Tier 1 instruction, a really important part of that is looking for potential outliers and how potential outliers can skew from what's really going on. And we kind of discovered by comparing the male-female distribution, comparing them to the 1s, the 2s, the 3s, the 4s, and the 5s. But I think there's also another sort of data consideration that can help us identify where outliers might be happening that could mislead us, right? So that misleading thing was maybe there's not actually like a male-female disparity. They just happen to fall at different proficiency levels. But another way that we can, I think, maybe help to catch that sooner is when we think about the length of the lines and how the length of the lines can skew that data, right? A really long line, especially if it's a small population, is going to have some kind of impact. Another part that affects that is the further a data point is to the edges, the lower that original that original score is, that baseline that we're comparing to, or the higher that is, there's also a higher impact that it can have. So if you remember at Rural Connect 2, we briefly talked about the difference between the norm curve equivalents and the percentile ranks. Norm curve equivalents are even across the board. Percentile ranks are really bunched up on the edges. And so when you convert that to norm curve equivalents, what happens is a change on the fringes of the data has a bigger impact than a change in the middle of the data. So like looking at this line here, this student X, this line is about the same size as this line here. However, this student is having a much bigger impact on that aggregate for males than this student here. And so the reason I say all of that is what I notice, 2 of our highest 3 students happen to be males who dropped. And so this is having a very outliery effect. I just made up a word. That's okay, right? Like this is having a dramatic effect on the aggregate of males. Not just because it's a longer red line, but it's a longer red line that started on the edge. And so that's another thing to think about when we're looking for those outliers. Because again, what we don't want to happen is assume that there's a problem or a disparity that isn't real. Because if we're focusing on a problem that isn't real, we're not focusing on the problem that is real.
All right, let's talk about some of these things. What does Ms. Note know about our Tier 1 instruction and its impact? Tell me something you said. I heard y'all say something.
I
Share.
just said she's got to change something. She's going to have to buck something up. I mean,
She's got to do something. So her Tier 1 instruction does have impact. It does matter every single day. And do you think that using your own experiences and your lens, might you be able to target something specific? Somebody share another thought that you had.
So we just talked about how she's probably teaching to the level of our ones and twos, then she needs to teach to a higher level and then work on scaffolding
I love
for
it.
those ones and twos.
I love it. She needs to teach on grade level benchmarks, right? To the appropriate rigor, right? Like it's not just that we're going to gear it toward that lowest level. We've got to do low floor and high ceiling.
You can't be in the mindset of they can't do it, because they can do it. You just have to provide the supports for them to be successful at it.
And you hear that, don't you? They can't. They can't. Teachers don't want to say they can't, but it feels like they can't sometimes. We've been there. We know that feeling, but we've got to root it in the truth. We've got to scaffold our instruction to hit the needs of all of our students. The students who can are being stifled like just a lid, and we see it in the data. There's a lid. Those higher level students aren't growing. Okay, we are going to reflect for a moment. How are you going to use this mid-year reflection tool back at your school? What can you do with it? So what's the value of this, and how might you incorporate it? What are some next steps? Think for a minute, talk at your tables.
So we're trying to figure out what happened.
We didn't have this the other day when we did our data meeting, but we went ahead and Kevin and myself and Carrie split the grade levels, and we did like where their previous year, that's where they're at, and Kevin at the end of it did their percentile and ranks on there, and so it was eye-opening for them.
Can you just give us points that they needed to make? Yeah, so they have last year's scores, they have last year's percentile, they've got the points they need to make growth, all of the kids. I think it's powerful for them.
It's powerful
to
to see it, and for them to do it
And to see it by student, and then having to analyze
Right now it's on an
it
Excel
in their subgroups.
She may not realize that she's
teaching to the left. She's probably in her mind, I'm teaching to here.
She's probably teaching like her hair's on fire and it's just not where it needs to be. It could be valuable for her too to see a teacher who's doing well with the higher level kids.
And that's what I would
And
wonder
that-
is
and
how
then
does the
pull
grade
small
level look
groups.
compared?
Right.
So are y'all planning in your PLC? Are you sharing? Are you looking at data?
Right.
So what's scary with that is like, as a teacher, you can be given work and you see like these are doing really well, and they're getting these answers correct.
Aspects you have to be very intentional that lead them to that. Not,
It's
that,
almost
not
like
that these weren't, but I think it's
Yeah.
there's a lot
It's
of
almost like look at past prior, like the questions you would ask is look at past prior year, look at PM2, make a list of the kids who moved. Right? I mean, we almost have to be very scripted in how we help our teachers go through it.
even backing up to this too.
Right. Well, that I think is a given to me.
Right, yeah.
I mean, that's going to be fill in the gap, and then what does it mean? But that's
That
one thing.
reminds me, though, of what we talked about last session. The tendency is to look really quickly to the students
Correct.
and start telling them
Why? Yeah.
why this
Yeah.
kid's not moving,
Yeah.
why this kid's
Why
not
they
moving.
couldn't do it.
So
So
we've
we've
got
gotta-
to. I love that you said and this, because you've got to look at those growth indicators for the class and get that bird's eye view.
It's like you just continue to peel back and build that understanding a little at a time. So if we're saying, okay, 75%, I feel pretty good about 75%. That's there. We're almost there at 80. That might mean good tier one,
What's
right?
my goal?
So I know 100. I agree. But I'm saying by comparison. I mean, So when I come down here though, why are we not learning quickly enough? Where is that discrepancy at? Then I'm going to come and say, okay, where am I losing?
Where they should be plugged in.
It's that vertical alignment, knowing where they come from and where they're going.
Yeah.
They don't know it. I mean, if they think they're teaching fractions, they're going to say, well, I don't teach it, I teach it. I mean,
Well, and we've had this discussion, like with big ideas with our reading curriculum, a lot of the times the teachers teach the curriculum and not the benchmark.
Yes.
And you have to use the curriculum to support your benchmark. So you
Who
still
was
have
it?
to know your benchmark.
Maybe it was Carly that told me she heard this something, but it was maybe it was you. Standards over stories and benchmarks over books.
Right.
And it was like that's that. Like those are all just tools to teach the benchmark. The standard is not.
You can't rely solely on those things that like you have to do more to be successful.
I think a lot of times teachers just go through the motions of, you know, the curriculum, the lesson, like this is our lesson plan, this is the lesson we're teaching today, and even math and ELA, they're not really picking what they need out of it. The teachers have to feel very rushed.
I want to remind you of the article that we read last time we were together. This data that you're going to put in front of your teachers, they need time to process it. They need to reflect on it. They need to celebrate, they need to have concerns, but there may be some teachers who have that emotional reaction. They may need to grieve. We talked about that last time, right? And so be careful to not rush too fast to that data chat without giving them time to reflect. They need to reflect and they need to prepare. That last slide where they bring to the table some ideas, why they think that and what support they would need. Like, give them a moment to think through what do they need to do different.
Renee,
yes.
If I could add, just to give you guys a peek behind the curtain, in all of the Rural Connect sessions, we will be doing this carousel with teachers with sample data. If you are scaling up at your school, school-wide data, beyond teachers who have come to Rural Connect, it is strongly recommended that you use sample data when you introduce this tool and think about how to use the PM2 reports before you give them their data. And when you give them their data, you give them this tool and you send them away to have some time to reflect before you do that data chat, as Renee has suggested. So we will take everybody in Rural Connect through this protocol with sample data from PM2 and this mid-year reflection tool. But if you have teachers outside of that, think about how you might still work with the sample data. It is very hard to process PM2 reports and this mid-year reflection tool while you're seeing your data for the first time. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you bringing up that point. All right, we have an article for you to read because I know you're already thinking, okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to use this? If so, how? What might that look like? And you had some ideas, but I want you to just take a minute to consider it on your own. Do some reading, annotate that. You can mark all over it. The article is actually in your folder. It's called Practicing the Art of the Data Chat. So consider, what barriers are you going to face when you go to have these conversations at your school?